Right, that's the important thing. Did I spill it? Oh, darn. Hi, my name is Linda, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Dave and Dave. I also want to make an amends to Dave because he called me, and I was very confused when we were talking on the phone. And I'm sure by the time he got off the phone, he was like, I'm not even sure this girl is sober. Because I thought he was calling me about a different convention, and it was very confusing. So I really apologize if I created anxiety for you. And I don't do those things because, like, I'm a good person. I do those things because I think I talked to Dave in January. What month is this? September. And it's still bothering me. And tonight I would like to lay my head down and not worry about this conversation I have with Dave. So that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me, is when I take full responsibility for my actions, I can be free. And I'm super grateful to be here. I'm grateful to talk on 6 and 7. I just turned 25 years sober. I don't know how that happened. And I'll tell you, when I was new, talking on 6 and 7, yeah, that wouldn't have happened. Like, I wouldn't even stay in the room with a speaker who was talking on 6 and 7, because it was just so over my head. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. This is gibberish. I don't have any character defects. Like, my problem was drinking. I don't drink anymore. Everything's fine. And, you know, my first experience with 6 and 7 were after I did 4 and 5. And my sponsor and I came out of the woods because I knew that once I read my inventory to her, the AA police were going to come and arrest me. So I made her hike really far into the mountains. And then we're trudging out, and she says to me, how do you feel? And I said, quiet. She said, oh yeah, that's peace and serenity. And I said, yeah, I don't like this. And that was the truth for me. Like, it brought me right up close to me. And okay, I did all this inventory, and I told you all my secrets, and I said all my character defects. Now what? Like, now you know who I really am. And now I'm really afraid. Like, I've been hiding this stuff all my life. And I know you're going to go talk about this, and I'm going to go to prison now. And so I was afraid. Like, it never occurred to me that I could change. I did not come to Alcoholics Anonymous to change. I didn't need to change. My life was fine, thank you very much. I mean, it was a little bit off, but it really wasn't all that bad. And I heard Lori talk last night, and my mouth fell open, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, she looks like a PTA mom. And, you know, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous does for us. Like, it takes us from the gutter and makes us human beings. But when I first got here, I didn't know that. I couldn't see that. I did believe that I lived a normal life. And it wasn't until you kind of hang out in Alcoholics Anonymous a little while that you start to get a small inkling that something is very wrong with you. And Carl talked about, like, in order for me to do step two, I have to admit that I am completely 100% insane. And I'm not, thank you very much. Like, I have a house. It's a little bit rough on the edges. The windows are boarded up. There's graffiti painted on all the walls. There's punch holes in the walls. My children go and run and hide in the closet on a daily basis because there's so much violence going on in that house. But that seemed pretty normal to me. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous not believing I needed you, not believing I had a problem. And I'm just going to briefly tell you what my life looked like when I walked into the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And maybe you'll be able to determine that I was insane. Maybe you won't. So I had a little 10-year-old who was attempting suicide. And if you have children at 10, they're like sweet, innocent babies. Like Carl talked about the relationship he has with his children and like that enormous love he feels for his kids. And I thought, gee, I want that. Like, I'm 25 years sober, still trying to find that type of connection with my kids, and it just hasn't happened yet, and that's okay. But my daughter's answer to life was suicide at 10. My son was 15 years of age, being arrested on a weekly basis. I had a stepson, 15, stealing cars, beating up on people. I had a 17-year-old stepdaughter, pregnant with twins. And I was married to a man who had been barricaded in the bedroom with the doors and the windows screwed shut with a loaded semi-automatic rifle for 2.5 months. And there was nothing wrong with my life. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And on February 14th, 1998, 9 cop cars showed up at my house. The bomb squad came. The SWAT team was on its way. And he went to jail that day, and I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And, Carl talked about the colors in life. Like, we find those colors here. And I remember my first sponsor. So he was arrested on a Friday, and she took me hiking on a Saturday. And I remember walking in the mountains and saying to her, like, why is the color so bright? Like, has it always been like this? And she looked at me and she said, yes. And I was like, really? Like, something's not right. And I've talked to a lot of people who have spent some significant time in prison, and that's kind of how life gets, like just flat and gray. And I just had no idea. And, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not telling you what's going on because I don't think I need to. Like, my life is okay. And, my daughter, she's a little more fragile than I am, but, maybe now she'll be okay since he's gone. And, my son, he's a bit out of control, but that has nothing to do with me. Like, there's something off about him, and I've known it since he was very tiny, and I just took no responsibility for anything. That's the truth of it. And I did my 5th step, and my sponsor said, go home, be quiet for an hour, think about what you've done. Why would I want to think about anything? Like, I just told you all my secrets. What I want to think about is I want to off myself, or better, off you, because then you can't tell anyone anything of what I said. And luckily, neither of those choices I did. And then I went on to work 8 and 9, and I found a lot of freedom in 8 and 9 because I took real responsibility. Like, I knew when I did that inventory, I was a thief. I'd stolen from every company I've worked for. And so I had to pay the money back. And, you know, I had several husbands, and I cheated on all of them. But that's okay. Like, that's not so bad. And, like, I really had a hard time finding things that were defects of character. And I'm so glad that my sponsor didn't ask me to make a list of defects, because I couldn't have done it. Like, I was just so checked out. And that was something that I heard all the speakers talk about, like that complete disconnect from our lives. And I was completely disconnected from my life, obviously. How many people in this room think I was insane? See, not everyone, yeah. All right. You think like I do. So, I didn't start sponsoring people till I was a couple years sober, because I was crazy and nobody wanted what I had. And I was a tough, badass biker chick, and I rode to the meetings on my Harley, and I had torn up blue jeans and hostages t-shirts, and like, if you looked at me, I would growl at you. Like, I will stab you if you talk to me. So people just kind of left me alone. And my sponsor, thank God, was like a big be of service. So go to meetings. If you don't want to talk to anyone, go to meetings, mop the floors, wash the coffee cups, and empty the ashtrays. Some meetings smoked then. And so that's what I did. And I just listened. Like, if you go to meetings and there's a newcomer in the room, I can guarantee they're watching you. And that's something that my sponsor taught me from the beginning. Like, people's lives depend on how you're behaving in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was me. Like, I would watch you. And Carl talked about, like, sometimes there would fights that would break out. And I remember one time, this woman, she had, 25 years of sobriety, and this homeless man came in, and he was kind of disruptive, and she felt very disrespected. So she started screaming at him in the middle of the meeting, and I jumped out of my chair, ran across the room, bawling my eyes out, because I thought, what is this? Like, this is what's in my home, not in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, it took me a while to even just begin to see my life in any real type of reality. So to look for character defects, like I said, I had cheated on anyone I had been with. And I don't normally talk about this, but I have to today. Thank you very much. And I just had this opinion that if you couldn't hold on to your husband, that's your problem, and not mine. And I didn't seek him out, he sought me out, so what's the big deal? And I was a couple years sober, and I started sponsoring. And I was only allowed to sponsor women. And so I'm sponsoring this one woman, and she says to me, I am not leaving my marriage. I want to stay in my marriage, and that's just the way it is. And I'm like, okay. And so we start working through the steps, and I had put my 4th step in the cupboard. So I went and got my 4th step to kind of, I don't know, like help me kind of see what did my sponsor tell me. And I'm reading my 4th step and I start crying because I realize there's so much on this 4th step that I'm still doing, and I'm 3 years sober. And I was shocked. And I put my 4th step down and I said, Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work. I mean, I thought, like, it just doesn't work. Like, you told me if I was entirely willing and did these steps, I would have a transformation and I would be perfect. That's what you told me. And so that's what I did. Like, I came in so willing. I went to 9 meetings a week. I did everything that my sponsor told me to do, and I had to make some really tough choices because I screwed up a lot of stuff. And Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work because I thought I cheated on men because I was drinking. But now I'm sober. So what am I going to do now? Like this is a problem. And I went to my sponsor because I thought, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, I don't have another solution. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work. I've been sober long enough, like, I don't want to go back to my old life. I remember the violence in our house. And, I could see that my kids were really damaged. And I didn't want to go back to that. So I called my sponsor to tell my sponsor that I'm going to kill myself. And my sponsor said, why? And I said, at that time I had a male sponsor because there was no way in hell I was going to tell a female that I was having affairs with married men. Like, you would, tar and feather me for sure. Because I would look at the women and they would be so beautiful and put together and gentle, and they didn't swear, and they didn't come to meetings with black eyes, and they didn't beat up their kids. And like you guys talked about, I remember I was a couple months sober and I was listening to this man and woman in the kitchen talk about family meetings and mutual respect. And I was baffled. Like, what is that? Family meeting? No, I'm the parent. You do it my way. And if you don't do it my way, I'm going to put my fist in your mouth. That's the way it's going to go. And I was just baffled by the things that would happen here. And I would go to your parties, and I would go into these houses that the windows were all nice and clean, and you could actually see through them. And, like, people were kind to each other in that house. And it always fascinated me, the husbands and the wives. Like, he would just speak to her very gently, and sometimes she would say, no, sweetheart, that doesn't work for me. And I would think, have you lost your mind? Like, are you kidding me? And I would just wait for a fist to come flying out to crack her in the jaw, and it wouldn't happen. And I thought, well, this is very strange. So I called my sponsor on that day, and my sponsor said, sweetheart, There are many of us who act that way here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Some don't anymore and some still do. Who would you like to be? And I thought, what are you talking about? Like, I felt below the dredge in the barrel. Like, I just felt so dark and black and unable to be transformed. Because I had worked the steps, and I did a thorough, honest inventory, and I made all my amends. Like, my sponsor didn't say, we're going to make 2 lists, one list who you're not willing to make amends to, and one list who you are going to make amends to. She said, you will make amends to everybody. There's no question about it. It's that simple. And I just followed direction. And so AA doesn't work. Like, I've done the work here. And so I said to my sponsor, well, I would like to try and be different. And he said to me, then you need to be different. You need to look at you. And I was like, wait a minute, like, I'm not giving them black eyes, they're giving me black eyes. And my sponsor said to me, yeah, you don't treat men with much respect. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I just couldn't see. It was beyond my realm. And, that's what I've been taught about 6 and 7 is that God removes my defects of character only when they stand in the way of usefulness to him and others. And up until that point, he was having quite a good time with my character defects. Because then I started sponsoring more and more women. Now I'm still having affairs, but they don't know that. And then I start to think about, if they find out, they will not let me sponsor them. And if they don't let me sponsor them, I'm going to drink again. And if I drink again, I'm going to die. So maybe I better change. And, I didn't change because I wanted to. I changed because I was afraid. And I wasn't even afraid of getting caught. What I was afraid of is drinking. And, for me, that's how God works. Like, I noticed a defect. I went to my sponsor, and my sponsor's solution to that defect was, go sponsor more women. What? Like, I don't understand how that has anything to do with anything. And he would say, go be of service, go be more of service. And in that, God, the universe, would put things in my life that showed me more clearly my defects, and then I could say, okay, maybe we should try something different here. And I will tell you that leaving men who beat me was the hardest thing I had ever done. Now, that might sound crazy to some people, but I was 4 years sober, and I thought I was going to drink. Like, I would call my sponsor, and I would be crying, and I would say, I cannot do this. I must find someone to beat me. And my sponsor would get very quiet on the phone, and he would say, Linda, that's crazy. And I would like, well, okay, that's not a solution, but what do I do? And, God has such a funny sense of humor, because I was 4 years sober, and I really believed that men sponsor men, women sponsor women. That was really supported in the meeting. And yet somehow I found myself being sponsored by this man. And I still believe that it's best for women to sponsor women, but my experience shows that that's not always what God wants. And I remember I would go to my sponsor's house, and I was the only female that he sponsored, and we would have a Bigbook study, and it'd be a room full of men. And what I found in that meeting is I hated men. I absolutely despised them because I had put so many dangerous men in mine and my children's life, and I just clumped you all in one bucket. You all were a-holes, and not a one of you were kind and gentle. And I sat in those meetings crawling out of my skin. And then one day we were leaving, and one of the gentlemen that he sponsors said, "Linda, let me walk you to your car." And I was like, "Yep, here it comes. I know what's going to happen now." He's married. He's going to ask me for a side hustle, and I'll give it to him. And then I will know. I will prove to myself that all men are crap. And he walked me to my car, and he opened the door, and I got in the car, and he shut the door, and I rolled down the window, and he said, "Have a really great night." And he turned around and walked away. And I was like, what? Like, what just happened? And I drive home, and I call my sponsor, and I'm sobbing. And my sponsor said, "What happened?" And I said, like, he walked me to my car, put me in my car, and respectfully said, "Have a good night," and walked away. And my sponsor said, "Yeah, that's how real men act, Linda." And that really started my journey. And what I had to do was go back and look at 6 and 7 and look at my part and my character defects and how I had been with men that had never hit a female before, until you're with me, because I know what buttons to push. I know how to push you up against the wall until you take a swing at me, and then I feel comfortable. And I hated taking responsibility for that. Like, what kind of individual will seek out that type of violence? Yeah, that's me. And what happened was, as I learned to really accept the magnitude of 6 and 7, my life started to change. And, you know, again, for the next 10 years, my sponsor was really big about service. Just go be of service. The rest will come. And I made my amends in my first year, and I paid back all the money I stole from, and, you know, I cleaned up all the big stuff. And then I started to have to look at who I am as a human, and my children. And my son was an alcoholic. He had been drinking and using since he was 9. And like, I've put people in his life that murder people 6 hours after my daughter's sleeping on their chest, and just really, really dangerous people. And the first time that I remember that God removed my defect of character, now I know that God removed my drinking, but the rest of my defects, and I didn't see that God had removed my drinking. I just knew I was sober now. And but I was about maybe 7 months sober, and all right. Okay. I don't know what that cord is for, but that was quite interesting. Should we fix it? Let it be. Okay, life on life's terms. Look at that. So when I was 30 days sober, my sponsor said, like, your son needs a lot more help than you can give to him. And my sponsor had a better inkling of how crazy I was. And she said to me, the next time your son is arrested, I want you to give up custody of him to the courts. And I was like, dude, like, I'm 30 days sober. I can't do that. And she said, yeah, you can. And she just reminded me that you suck as a parent. And your son doesn't have the time for Alcoholics Anonymous to transform you. So he got arrested, and I relinquished custody of him, and he went into a little boys' home, and he got out of that boys' home, and he came home with an ankle monitor. He was 15, and he was angry. And, you know, the way I communicated with my son is, I told you once, if you didn't listen, I'm going to knock you out. It's that simple. Like, I'm the parent. You will respect me. And my sponsor said, you are not allowed to touch your son like that anymore. And I was like, I have no idea how to communicate with him. And so she said to me, lock yourself behind a door and have him on the outside and learn to talk to him through the door. And so that's what I did. And my sponsor said, if you want your son to respect you, you have to respect your son. And I remember one time, he was standing there with his fists bunched up and like his chest poked out, and he was like, I want to go to this event. And I was thinking, no, that's not going to happen. And he's like getting more and more aggressive posture, and I'm going to clock him. And what happens is, as I go to scream at him, what falls out of my mouth is a whisper. And I say to him, it's not okay to talk to me like that. And I watch his hands uncurl and his body relax. And he leans up against the wall. And he says to me, okay, Mom, no problem. And I walk outside. And I'm dating this guy. He goes outside with me. And he says to me, what the hell was that? And I was like, that had to have been God, because I was going to clock the kid. I don't know what that was. And that was the very first time that I consciously saw the power of God on 6 and 7, how my character defect was miraculously lifted out of me. Now fast forward about a week or two, and that same boy and I are in the car, and he's having a meltdown, and I have a new awareness, but I'm still screaming, but I'm not putting my hands on him, so that's progress. And we're driving in the car, and he takes a swing, and he busts the windshield of my car from the inside, and I'm screaming at him at the top of his lungs, and I watch him curl up into a ball like a little baby and push himself up against the door. And I thought to myself, that is what your screaming does. That's the harm that you are doing. And I never raised my voice to my son again. Now, I am not capable of that kind of power. There's absolutely no way. I can't even see the damage that I'm doing, let alone change it. It has to be God. And what I've been taught is that's where service work comes. I see a problem, and I go be of service. Don't worry about the problem. Just go be of service. Go take care of God's kids. Go be kind. Go put the meeting together. Go bake cookies for the meeting. And God did. He worked it all out. He changed me. He transformed me. One day, I decided that I don't want to date out of work construction workers anymore. Out of work construction workers. So I kind of looked at the girls in the meeting, because I'm still not talking to you. And I noticed, like, they have their hair and makeup, and their nails are done, and they paint their toes, which was just weird. And, they didn't ride Harleys, and they wore nice clothes. And I thought, well, they're married to a doctor or a lawyer, so if I want what they have, I better do what they do. And so I did. I went to a girl in the program who did makeup, and I was like, could you teach me how to do makeup? And she did my makeup for the day, and she brought me this mirror, and she put it in front of me, and I burst into tears. Because what I saw staring back was this beautiful woman of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, it was not me, but what I saw was you in me. And I thought, oh, forget that construction worker. I want to do this for me, because this makes me feel good. So one more time, God used my character defect to make a change. And I really had to work hard at changing me when it came to men. And it was difficult. It was very difficult. And I had to go to the women in AA, and I had to really ask for help. Because that's the other thing I've been taught here, is that I can't fix anything in my life. If I'm not paying my bills on time, I better tell someone. Otherwise, my house is going to be repossessed. Because, I'm just a procrastinator and a liar and a people pleaser. And my sponsor would say, well, if you're a people pleaser, what does that really mean? And the truth is, what that means is I'm a liar. I'm going to show you who and what I think you want me to be, so I can get what I think I want you to give to me. That's just a liar, plain and simple. People pleasing seems so nice and innocent. Liar, that's very different. And the longer I have been around here, the longer that I started to slowly see my defects of character by comparing myself to you. Because you guys, to my mind, lived normal lives. I watch the men come up here in suits and tell these stories like Carl talks about and Kenny talks about. Kenny's story with being behind the McDonald's. And now look at him. He's like a normal human being who goes out into society and shakes hands with real people. And nobody even knows that he used to live by a trash can, because of how he was willing to look at his own character and make changes with God and Alcoholics Anonymous help. Now, I've had some tough stuff in my sobriety. I got married and then got divorced, and that kind of chapped my feelings, because I thought, I did it right here in AA. I gave up all my character defects, and I dated this man for a year, and I was engaged for a year, and I never cheated on him, and I was so respectful, and then he drank. And my sponsor said, well, yeah, we can't handle alcohol in any container. We know how you are. And That man went on to get remarried, and there's multiple restraining orders against his new wife and him. And I think, what happened to my sweet, gentle man of Alcoholics Anonymous? And character defects, alcohol, that's what happens. Like, we are just changed when we are practicing those defects of character. I don't even have to drink to practice those defects of character. And, throughout my early sobriety, it just took me a really long time to connect with humans. Like, I sponsored a lot of people, and I did it because that's what my sponsor told me to do. But I didn't really have any feelings for those women, and I acted like I did. Thank God you taught me how to act as if. My sponsor told me, like, get a calendar, and when the women that you sponsor tells you an important event, write it down in the calendar. They're going to have some medical test, or their husband or their kid's going to get a award, write it down in the calendar. And so I just did what I was told. But what started to happen is I started to think about you instead of me. I started to pay attention. I started to be retrained. Now, at 25 years of sobriety, I come into a room of normal people, and I tell the women, oh, that lipstick is so beautiful on you, and I tell the men, you look so nice in that suit. And I don't do those things because I'm such a great person. I do those things because what it does is it removes the barrier between me and you. Because when I'm thinking about you, I cannot be thinking about me. And therein lies my solution. And so I was trained here. I was told, go to meetings, put your phone away, pay attention to whoever's speaking. When they get to the announcements, don't get your phone out of your purse. Pay attention to what the person up there is saying about the announcements. And I was like, well, why would I want to do that? Like, I don't really care what the announcements are. And my sponsor said, because it shows disrespect to the person who's speaking not to make eye contact. And so I learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous, by doing something different, that I had a character defect of disrespect. I disrespected everyone. I go into the grocery store, I'm on the telephone, I'm going to check out, continue on the phone. Whoever that checkout person is, not important to me, not at all what I'm doing. Maybe I'm talking to someone in Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, what my sponsor has taught me is that person in front of you is the most important, because that's where God brought you. If God wants you to talk to that person in Alcoholics Anonymous, he would have left you in your car where you would have privacy. And my sponsor trained me. What is your part? Look at you. What is the defect of character that you are practicing? And it always came down to pride and ego. And I would think, yeah, but AA says I must be willing. Yeah, but you don't step on people to be willing. Oh. Wow. And I remember when I was married to that man, like, we had a really good marriage before he started to drink, but it was hard for me because he was kind to me, and I didn't like that. Like, it was really painful. And I remember that I went to a conference, and I had a great time at the conference. And I had a great time because Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me, go and be of service. And I got home, and I was telling my husband, like, what a great time I had, and the people, and what was generally said, and well, he got very angry. And I was like, you need to go to a meeting. And I called my sponsor because I'm pissed off. And I tell my sponsor what's going on, and my sponsor says to me, did you tell your husband you missed him? I was like, no, I didn't miss him. I had a great time at the conference. She said to me, maybe next time you could tell him that you miss him and tell your friends about your great time. And I said to her, but that means I'm lying to him. And she said, well, just act as if. It took me about 4 days to come to an awakening, and I realized how smart my sponsor was, because all I had to say to my husband was, oh, I'm so glad I'm home. I missed you so much, and what can I make for dinner or whatever. And he was happy, I was happy, and all my girlfriends loved to hear about how the conference went, and there were no problems. And what a revelation that I set things in motion. And what a revelation when I realized that, I play a part in everything. So I spent quite a few years making amends with my kids. And my son, after he went into that boys' home, he AWOL'd after 30 days. And he was 15 and a half, 16, and he spent from then to 21 homeless out on the streets. And, sometimes he would call me and he would say to me, Ma, I haven't eaten for 3 days. And I would just get on my knees and I would have to say, God, what do you want me to do? And sometimes God would say, go get him and feed him. And sometimes God would say, give him Kenny's phone number and let him call Kenny. And sometimes God would say, don't answer the phone. And on the days that God would say, go and feed him, I would pick my son up and we would go to a restaurant. And he was filthy dirty. And he would always order 2 meals. And he would eat half of one. And then he would pack up the rest. And he would get back in my car. And he would fall asleep for about 45 minutes. And then I would drive him to a street corner. And he would get out of my car with his little bag of trash clothes. And I would say, I'll see you later, son, I love you. And he would walk away. And when he was 21, he went into his first mental institution. And my son is 41 years old. He's had 9 significant suicide attempts. And people like Carl and Kenny have tried to connect with my son. And I've always kind of had this arm's distance from my son. I don't know what to do with you. Go to AA. Maybe they can help you, but I can't. And then after my son's 3rd suicide attempt, I decided that, a lot of why your son is where he's at is because he's been drinking and using since he was 9. And that's a direct result of you. And maybe we should try something different. And some people in Alcoholics Anonymous told me I was enabling my son, and other people told me that I was doing the right thing. And I would go to my sponsor, and my sponsor would say, you have to trust God. That's the only answer. And if you could be okay, if your son dies today and you could be okay and feel like you did everything you could and you have made all your amends, then you could walk away. And I couldn't do that. And so my sponsor said, then God wants you to continue to help. And I went and found my son on a street corner, and he had been in a psychotic break for a couple months. And I was like, look, you have been homeless since you were 15. Like, you're in your early 30s. You are not getting better. So let's try something different. And I put him in this little apartment in Pomona, and I don't know how to deal with this. And my son continues to get worse. And then one day he calls me in the middle of the night, and he says to me, someone set a bomb off in my apartment. So I go there, and the one thing I know about my son is he's delusional, but there's always some truth to his delusion. So I'm driving there, and I'm terrified. And the week prior, I had called the police out to his apartment, and they couldn't help me. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, this is so scary. And I go to that apartment, and I had called the mental health team, and they told me, we have to be able to see your son from the open door to help you. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. So I get to his apartment, and I set this can of paint in the doorway, and he's like, get in the house. I'm like, no, I want the fresh air. And the night before, God led me to a website, and I just started to talk to my son a little different. And I watched him relax and sit down on the couch and start telling me all his delusions. And instead of arguing with him and telling him how psychotic he was, I just said things like, that must be really hard to feel and think that way. And we had a 2.5-hour conversation waiting for that mental health team to show up. And then I don't know what happened, but a switch went off in my son, and he got up and barricaded that front door, and he went into the closet and got a shotgun. And he came out and repeatedly pointed that shotgun at him and at me. And then my son shot himself. And we had a 6-hour standoff with the SWAT team. And I remember thinking, this is a big deal. I'm gonna drink over this. This is a big deal. My feelings are coming out of my pores. I wanna go get duct tape and wrap myself up in it. And I called my sponsor, and my sponsor said, I will find someone to help you. And I was like, dude, this is too big for AA. And she said, just go be of service. And I was like, what does that mean? And I'm 15 years sober now. I'm in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I don't know what that means at that moment. And she does. She finds a couple of people to help me, and my son survives. He goes in the hospital, and we have to make a lot of hard choices. And my sponsor said, I want you to look at your part in this. And I was like, I don't have a part in this. Are you kidding me? He lost his mind. How could I have a part in that? And she said, well, perhaps you hung in there a little bit too long. And I'll tell you that it took me about 1.5 years to find the truth of my own character defects. And, my sponsor was right. I had no clue how to handle this situation. And I would get help, and my son would attempt suicide again, and then I would snatch him from the brink of death because I just wasn't willing to pay that ultimate sacrifice. And we stayed in it. And then I lived in LA, and I had a big job there because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I owned a house, and I was somebody in AA. I had a home group, and people knew me, and they knew my story, and they knew my history, and they knew my transformation, and there was a lot of respect there. And my sponsor said to me, "It's not safe for you to be here anymore." And I was like, "Have you lost your mind?" And she said to me, "If you're dead, none of this matters." Because the truth is, my son could not stay away. And so I left that job, and I sold that house, and I sold most of my things, and I left the country. And I was really upset with my son for a while, because in my mind, it was his fault. Until I was brought back to 6 and 7. And what I realized is that what my son was doing is what any 9-year-old boy would do. I'm hurting. I'm scared. I'm homeless. I'm hungry. My eye is swollen shut. I'm sepsis. Someone stabbed me. I'm 9 years old. What should I do? Go home to mom. And in my mind, he was an adult. Go figure out how to live your life without me. And in that, finding my character defects, my part in that situation, 6 and 7, being entirely willing to let God remove the character defects. Being entirely willing. What does that mean? Entirely willing to look at my part, whether it's this big or that big. Now, my son still doesn't know where I live, so my badge is kind of funny because it says I'm from California, but I'm not. And I was like, I wonder if I should say something. And I decided not to. And then my beautiful host said, "Where are you really from?" And here's the growth. So shortly after my son shot himself, I was at a meeting, and somebody asked me, "Where are you from?" And I froze. And I said, "Yeah, I can't tell you." And he looked at me, he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, it's a long story, but it's just best I don't say where I'm from." And the truth is that I had to practice that so that when my son asked me where I was at, I wouldn't just blurt it out to him answering his question. But when Leslie asked me, "Where are you from?" I knew I was safe. I knew I was safe because I found my part. And my son has not changed. He is still in the thick of it. But I've changed. And I've come to rely on God and Alcoholics Anonymous, not on me. Because what I know is me gets me married to a man who has a semi-automatic rifle and wants to kill all of us. What God wants for me is a life filled with peace and serenity and quietness. And I'm engaged to be married. And when I go and sleep at my fiance's house, we go up to bed and we're going to turn on the TV and I lay my head on his shoulder. We're going to watch a really good movie. And about 30 seconds later, I'm snoring. And he says to me, why do you always fall out? And I said, well, because AA has given me a quiet mind. And you remember way back when I wrote that fourth and did that fifth step, and my sponsor said that quiet mind was peace and serenity, and I said, I don't like it. It grows on you. Alcoholics Anonymous has transformed me. I don't look like my past anymore. As a matter of fact, because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the pandemic, I didn't have any more floors to mop and newcomers, and I live in Colorado now, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How do I be of service? And my sponsor said, take your service on a bigger level. So I went on this website for volunteer work, and there was this little job there with the police department to be a victim advocate as a volunteer. And so I read the description, and I'm like, oh my God, that's like sponsoring. I can do this. I'm perfect for this job. And I go and I apply for this job, and they interview me, and they ask me all these questions, and then they say to me, okay, well, you have to come and do a lie detector test. So I immediately start calling people in Alcoholics Anonymous and asking them, how do you pass a lie detector test and lie? Because there's no way I'm going to tell the police about my history. And I got great ideas. Someone said there were bankers and bank robbers here, and they were right. And then I went to that appointment for that lie detector test, and I told the truth. And that's not what I was planning on doing. I was planning on lying and then not getting the job. And I was okay with that because they didn't tell me in the ad that they were going to do a lie detector test. So I told the truth knowing that I'm not going to get this. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from the police department saying, we want you to come and spend the next 6 weeks at the police academy. And I was like, what? Like, how miraculous is Alcoholics Anonymous? And I've been in that position for 2.5 years. And those people think I'm just this nice little old lady who bakes cookies for the officers, and she's just so quiet and polite, and she just has this way about her with victims who have been in domestic violence or who are drunk, or she's just so calm and peaceful, and they just are drawn to her for some reason. And I think, yeah, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. One alcoholic talking to another. This one just doesn't know yet, but I know. And one more time, God uses my character defects to be useful to him and to others. And none of those police officers know my history. And I'm grateful for that. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous has made me into the very thing I never, ever wanted to be, a lady. Thank you.